that we feel that we would like to revisit and see if we can get those back into the budget. So we deferred for a week, and we're back here this Monday, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about some of those items. First off, I'm going to, the police chief, Chief Barnes, wanted to talk a little bit about the animal control program using our CSOs, and because that is one of the, there was a significant cut to that, and that was one of the line items that we wanted to revisit this evening. And I know the chief has another engagement, so we let him go first. So, good evening.
I appreciate the opportunity to be first in line. I have a Longfellow group meeting, and they've asked to speak with me, and that was on my calendar before this one made it on it. I've given some thought to, and I probably could have asked the committee to do this at the last meeting. This animal control is going great right now with 3 CSOs, and I can appreciate the challenge and the impact on the city of cutting that. It is one of the rare items of our budget that neither impacts expenditure restraint or the levy limits because it's in the animal control fund. Let me back up. The reserve funds that exist in that animal control savings account don't impact levy limits or expenditure restraint, and therefore I would ask that if you feel so inclined that a member of this committee make a motion to amend our budget to allocate up to $60,000 of those reserve funds that remain from previous years to be used to fund the CSO2s. So $20,000 would be levy, which is in there right now. $60,000 would be reserve funds. And if we don't utilize all $80,000 because a CSO2 takes a week of vacation or isn't available, those funds they would go back into that, or they wouldn't come out of that fund because that's where those reserve funds would go anyway. So that would allow us, without expenditure restraint issues or levy limits, to be able to continue to fund that program. Just those dollars would come out of that animal control rainy day surplus fund. Thank you.
And then if you look in the budget book, animal control is on page 145, 146. We do have approximately $90,719 in our animal control fund, and that fund balance, it kind of goes up and down depending on. I think the key metric there is it depends on enforcement. If licensing, if we're able to get the animals licensed and enforcement does its job in maintaining compliance, the animal control fund goes up, and we can fund the animal control CSOs. If it doesn't, then the fund goes down. So drastically cutting this line item could have a detrimental effect on animal control overall. So.
I think 2 points to your point that you just made. One other thing that really has the ability to impact that fund is our held for cause contract with the Humane Society. An animal held for cause during a criminal investigation or something that is not a stray that we take there, they can be very expensive, usually because we incur the vet bills for those animals while they are there. So it is impossible to forecast. Do we have 1 issue a year, or do we have 20 issues a year? And lastly, I would say the big unknown for us is we really got up and rolling with CSO2s this year, late March, early April, which is just the beginning of the licensing cycle. And I think the number is right about 1,000 additional licenses as a result of the CSO2s this year. Having them have the ability right at the first of the year to be able, we can't enforce licensing until April 1st, but having them proactively investing some of their time in ensuring licensing occurs. If they are able to license even more than the 1,000 they did, I can't tell you what that would look like, but there is the possibility that more dollars can go into the animal control fund, and in future years, funding that can be a blending of levy dollars as well as surplus dollars from the previous year if they were successful.
committee? Any questions? Alder Watson, did you or no?
Do we do the amendment now or later?
Do
Or
we
is
want
it
to roll these
packaged?
all, maybe roll these all into one
Okay.
amendment?
Cool.
That might be the best, because that gives us, then we can kind of look at the other items and,
And then I just had one question. So you were talking about the contracted services with the Humane Society. Like in the past 5 years, do you know how many, excuse me, like dogs or animals have been in, like, that we've had to keep there? Cases?
I can give you an educated guess.
Yeah.
That we will take between 150 and 200 non-dog strays. So we primarily call that the cat contract. And then held for cause can be anywhere between $5,000 and $50,000, depending on. So, like the really gigantic example is if we respond to a residence and there's 30 cats in it and they're all being neglected, that doesn't go on the cat contract. That's not a stray, that's a known animal, and it's part of an investigation. And if we were to take custody of those would become held for cause. So it's really a shot in the dark in trying to guesstimate what that's going to be. I know we work really hard to limit the amount of time an animal stays at the Humane Society, and we try and take ownership of those animals and get people to surrender animals to us, where we can then make better decisions about the future of that animal that takes into account the cost to maintain it there.
And you said it would be 150 cat max this, or non-dog stray this year?
That's what we proposed in the budget.
Okay. And then just maybe a silly question. What happens when you hit the 150?
Well, we will not take any more animals to the Humane Society.
Okay.
Not take any more non-dog strays to the Humane Society. And in order to try and maintain it at 150, we're gonna have to get very creative on finding solutions for animals that don't start bringing that number close to 150. So, like, one conversation I had last week about what is creative, like, we need to develop some relationships with some hobby farmers or farmers in the area, so that these are all things that have happened when our humane officers are running around and they're collecting chickens that are running around the street. Those are non-dog strays that are $180 a piece at 150, and they count toward the max. We've had pigs and numerous farm animals. If we can find a farm that takes them and is willing to care for them for the 7 or 14 days, and then we turn ownership over to that farmer, who can then do what they want with them. They're their property at that point. But it saves the city taxpayer $180 a piece to find creative solutions or other foster. A gerbil would be $180 if we have to take it to the Humane Society, and that's a hard thing for me to swallow.
Gotcha. Thank you.
any other questions? Alder Tierney?
Thank you. Mary Ann, quick question for you. We had kind of in passing at the last meeting, we had kind of talked to you about a few things that we thought shouldn't be cut, and animal control was one of them. And you were going to maybe look at some other things where we could jockey that in there a little bit.
Besides the reserves?
Was it, because there was a $45,000, yeah, the consulting.
Oh, so the consultant right now is under the Economic Development Fund. That's for the park study. So, you know, I guess it's not as pertinent, or, you know, taking money out of the animal control reserve seems more realistic to me than taking it out of the Economic Development Fund.
Okay, just, I know we had briefly
Yeah.
talked about that,
I
so,
think it's better to take it out of the reserves that have accumulated for the fund.
okay, thank you.
It's kind of, that fund is kind of tagged for animal control, so it
Yeah.
makes fiscal sense
Right.
for it to dip that
And like
fund.
Matt said, if we don't use all of the money, it flows right back to reserves. And if we make more money than we predicted in permit sales, that flows right down to the reserve too, which is why we've had reserves build up over time, is because of those factors occurring.
All right. Anything else? Okay, should we then just kind of, we'll just kind of hold that for the moment and maybe discuss some of our other items? And then we can, we can put together a resolution for, I guess, for everything or individually at the end. So, one of the things, the last week we did not get to is with the mayor and the mayor's office. I know he wanted to talk about some of the budgetary challenges that came out of his office. So, Mayor, I'll give you a chance to give your 2 cents worth.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's a pretty small office. I'll just start out quickly on what we looked at there. We got rid of as many memberships and subscriptions as possible, and you see we reduced the total mayor's budget by about $20,000. But maybe more importantly, is other thing associated with mayor's spending is our promotions budget, and that comes out of our, I lost the page, Mary Ann. I think that's capital projects purchasing fund, I believe. So we cut $37,000 out of promotions.
Yeah,
So-
other general government on page 95.
So there'd be less keychains, water bottles, Magic 8 balls. We've got a closet full of junk we can get rid of this year. So there'd be less of that going out. And then, the process itself, I think it's important to note because there's been some misinformation that was been put out into the local media that somehow this was some stuff sneaking into the budget. We were faced early on with a $4 million deficit, a $4 million shortfall, where we had issued guidance, and you can see it. It's the cover letter of the budget. We asked directors. This was a citywide, staff-wide, and the staff did a great job coming together. We had 4 or 5 directors meetings on the topic specific to this, and then we had multiple meetings with every director to come up with a plan to meet the goal. We had originally thought we needed $4 million, which could have amounted to some flexible hiring freezes up to 20 positions. And as it turned out, with shared revenue coming in significantly higher, our health insurance not as high as we anticipated, some levy limit room and spending constraints, we're down to about 1.9 million, I believe. So the haircuts the directors had to take was significantly more manageable, and we got there. And that's what we presented. And we presented it as a team. We presented it as a balanced budget that all directors agreed upon before it came to you from me. It was a department head effort. So they made many suggestions. We listed them in priority. The finance director and I made some decisions. Most of them, though, were done by the directors. So to imply that there's some negative shenanigans going on here is extremely inappropriate. So we discovered a few things here that alders feel are important, and we'll have that, I think, respectful conversation to see how we can fulfill those for you. There's a list of other cuts that were offered by directors. If we don't like the ones that we selected between Marianne and I and directors, you have an opportunity to push back and ask for something else, because there are other things we can look at. But I think more importantly, from my office standpoint, getting through this budget is the easy part. The part we need to start focusing on is some long-term stuff. Marianne's working on the 5-year capital and debt plan. I mean, that's important because right now we have torpedoes in the water that are going to continue to build our debt year over year over year out until 2030, adding another $15 to $30 million because of commitments we've made in past councils that we are incapable of. I talked about constraints. Budget constraints come from the state. They tell us what we can spend. We need to start putting in budget restraints Those are internal. Those are what we decide we can or can't spend. So the 5-year capital budget plan is important. I also we need to make sure we look at what are we going to do with the PFAS settlement money. We have an idea of what that's going to be, but when it comes in, that we spend it on utility operations to hold water rates steady, that we don't go spending it on other things, as has been suggested. And also, we want to involve council in this. I call it a ticking time bomb, but I think the popular media calls it a budget cliff, and that is our SAFER and ARPA money running out at the end of next year with 15 full-time positions in the balance. So a referendum, which we'll talk about tonight, is going to likely have to happen. So how do we get there from that? City of Brookfield did the SAFER firefighters a year ahead of us. And if you recall, Bob Bartek stood here and told us about that as a reason why we should do this. We did it. They ran out of money. They went to a referendum, and that referendum failed. They are $4 to $7 million behind right now and have to come up with a plan. We've got a plan that we've been working on that is a fraction of that Marianne will talk about here shortly. But it takes discipline. It takes discipline from this body, and that's all I can ask for. Thank you.
All right.
Well, lastly, I'm sorry. I do want to, again, thank the staff. This was not easy. You heard the chief last week say this wasn't easy or wasn't fun or something to that effect. Actually, I thought it was kind of fun. Mary and Ann and I had a lot of fun trying to get to the goal, and we got there. So thanks to the staff.
All right. Well, thanks for that. And I know this is definitely a challenging budget. I find it a little amazing that that the initial draft came to us balanced, which is nice. It gives us the ability to finish things up here in these budget sessions. So, moving on to the next, we'll talk about the referendum in a little bit. I think we want to kind of circle back to these other loose ends, and then we'll finish up our discussion on the referendum. The next item is that the committee identified for discussion on how we can, with the budget for this next year, is to find is $30,000 in funding in order to keep the third pool open. If you recall from the Parks and Rec Department, if they were proposing that all 3 pools in the city would be filled and operational, but only 2 pools on a given day would be open, and then the third one would be left. I'm not going to say empty, left unused for that day, and doing so cuts the staff costs, personnel costs, by $30,000. The vacant, the unused pool could be used for lessons and other items, but still for general swim it would be not open. One pool would not be open on any given day during the pool season. So if the committee wants to keep all 3 pools open each day during pool season, we'll need to find $30,000 from some place. The Parks and Recreation meeting did meet prior to this committee meeting today, and there was a motion made in order to, as a recommendation, to keep all 3 pools open during the season. So that's where we're at here. Alder Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other thing that kind of went along with that I think we should really consider was there was $3,900 in removing dumpsters from parks. I just think that's a recipe for disaster because people are going to be in there. They're going to have their picnics, their get-togethers, whatever, and there's not going to be a place to put this. And I just see that ending up being more litter in our park. Our parks not looking the way that they should. I I just don't think that that's the best way to cut $3,900 is by taking away places to put trash when you're in a park. But I don't know who else would agree with me on that, but that's my take. I think there could be maybe other cuts there that wouldn't be as important as that in our park areas. Thank you.
All right, and I think Alder Watson?
So it was brought up at Park and Rec, talking about the dumpsters, because we also were worried maybe an increase in littering, which could increase staff time and cost, to pick stuff up. And Jamie, I mean, she can probably speak to this too, but she mentioned that the 8 that they're going to remove are strategically placed, or there's already another one at a different location not too far away. So, like, on the park department, or Park and Rec, we just asked if, we could try this out this year, see how it goes, and they could take an inventory of it throughout the year to see if it has increased an uptick in littering and the look of our parks. So I know I'm for like having places that people can throw away their trash for sure, because it's way more convenient than having to get people to pick it up. So, but.
I know one of the side effects of having available dumpsters, and this was mentioned in that Parks and Rec meeting, is that there's a greater chance of illegal dumping happening at those dumpsters, and they get filled with non-park trash. And I've seen that, visiting parks, and you throw something away, and it's full of mattresses and chairs and whatnot. That did not that did not come from using the park. Wisconsin state parks have removed dumpsters long time ago, many years ago, with the exception of maybe in the camping areas. But you cannot find a garbage can to save your life in a day use area, and it's all pack in, pack out. And I'd like to see I'd like to see something like that encouraged with our city parks. Alder Watson?
So the other thing that was sort of in addition to that resolution, just asking this committee to keep all 3 pools open, was additionally not to pursue the park study, the city-county park study. At this point, the $45,000 just seems a little steep for something that's really a huge upfront cost to like diverge these 2 services. So that was the other suggestion from Parks.
Alder Tierney?
I agree with Alder Watson on that. This is a subject that we had addressed actually earlier this year about whether to have a separation of Wausau and the county, and the vote was to keep them together. So I am in agreement. I think that we can look at spending $45,000 on much more pressing things. Thank you.
Mary Ann, I know we mentioned a little bit earlier about that $45,000 that's sitting in the Economic Development Fund. Would that be, could that be a method in order to fund our pools for the summer, or would it, or not?
So I'm trying to think of how you would actually accomplish that. I mean, you could, perhaps transfer those funds to the 400 block fund, and then maybe do some allocations of other types of expenses to the 400 block, and then you would have room for the pools. Or Jamie, I had kind of gone through the parks budget to see if there was maybe some other options, like maybe there was some cushion within some line items. I didn't really see any specific cushions, but I wondered too, because you have your donation accounts, would you be able to spend down some of your donation accounts on operating the pools?
Mr. Chair, too.
Oh.
I was wondering, because earlier she mentioned that 20,000, it takes about 20 grand to run those cool fountains on 400 blocks. So if we transferred at least 20 over to the 400 block to run those fountains, then that would save up at least, free up 20 grand somewhere else that we could do the pool.
The fountains are already funded in the 400 block fund, so I don't know.
But if we added the,
So that-
Transferred from economic development into 400 block to keep,
Yeah.
and then shift fountains to pool? That makes sense?
I don't know. It makes sense to me, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
As far as our gift account goes, no, there isn't. Those are all earmarked. When we get gifts, they're usually for a particular program. We've got a spreadsheet that shows all what that funding is for. We used a lot of the unallocated amounts for the skate park to make up that difference for those grants. So there's a little bit, but not enough to fund a pool. And I can show you, I can give you that printout of what that spreadsheet is with all of those earmarks on there. But the majority of our unallocated amount where we had gotten like endowments in the previous years went to the skate park. We needed all that
You
funding.
had like $100-some thousand in there in your donations accounts, right?
Yeah, but I can send you the spreadsheet how it's all allocated. Because a lot of it is trees. When we get memorial benches and trees, that's specific for those items. And then at the end of the year, when we buy the supplies to build those benches, then that gets reimbursed out of in the general fund. So I'll give that to you.
Okay.
Anything else? Anyone else on, Mayor? You had something?
Sure. Okay, so let's not mix these pots. Let's not start doing shell games here. There's other ways to do this. This is money that's coming from the Economic Development Fund. If you recall, last year, I suggested the separation of the city with the parks because it's a unique arrangement, and it was not studied. It was not detailed study. It was dismissed out of hand at the Parks and Rec committee meeting. So the suggestion at that meeting, along with Marianne and I, we stood right here at the podium, was to get a study so we could look at the efficiencies of this arrangement to see if it really is paying the dividends we think we're told that it is. Nobody was able to defend it. I feel that there's bloat. The budget is neutral for parks and for the county, and we could have put it in and asked the county to pay for half of this. This is coming out of a unique pot that is not associated with the parks budget, so it is inappropriate. You know, there are other items that were suggested as cuts that could be looked at. I mean, we can go through those, or we can pass it on to other things as far as the department. Every department was asked to hit a goal. Some did, some didn't. This is an area where it's not a lot of money. It's $30,000 in a $7.5 million budget. So we can easily pass that along and ask the director to find those cuts and find those ways to stay within the budget. But this particular study is more about the zero-based budget that we promised we would look at and finding efficiencies in our operations. We know where the big spenders are: police, fire, DPW, and parks right now. So parks is one we decided we would look at closer to find those efficiencies, and here's the money to be able to do that. It's also an earmark amongst other professional services that we have. We don't have to get that entire amount, but it's there for an earmark as we go along.
Okay. Alder Watson?
I recall an earlier vote we had where we were going to do an RFP for $100,000, the potential for $100,000 consulting fee. And there was a lot of debate about whether that $100,000 consulting fee was worth it. And I think we ended up narrowly making it, and then it was vetoed, overturned. So I think one of the questions that came up, which is a valid one, I think in this case, is there staff on site that could do this? So I think, yes, $45,000 is a very small part of our entire budget, but I think we have very competent staff that potentially could drill into that question a little bit better. Thanks.
Okay. It's, one of the things with finding the $30,000 to keep the pool open, I know it was mentioned in Parks and Rec that that's about a penny on the mill rate, but the mill rate, we are up to the limit. So I don't think, we don't have a penny to give, do we?
Nope.
Yeah. So,
That's the problem.
okay, Alder Tierney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the mayor said earlier that they were given lists, and he and Mary Ann looked at these lists and did some decisions on what would be there. I guess what would be interesting is to see what some of the other items were for Parks and Recs that maybe we thought it's more important to have the pool than to have this or that, possibly.
I can run through them kind of quickly for you if you like.
That would be great.
To not run the 400 block fountain.
That was 24,000.
So close one pool totally was 60. Reduce the daily operations to 2 pools at a time was a 30,000 savings. Not running the 400 block fountain was just under 24,000. Not to run the River Life fountain was just under 7,000. To not run the splash pad at Brockmeyer Park was just under 9,000. To have no ice rinks on the 400 block was $2,000. To not install the piers at River Life was just under 7. Eliminate the dumpsters was 3,900. And then reduce small projects was 10 grand. So we did that. And we did the dumpsters, and then we did the one pool closing out of those choices. And then Jamie did make a comment of, implementing an urban forestry fee. So the city of Madison has that. And so they charge a rate per parcel in the city. And if we charged a $2 monthly fee, it would generate about $417,000. In that situation, again, it's a revenue, so it's not reducing our expenses, but we would be able to put that in a separate fund then, and we would move out all of our urban forestry costs into that separate fund and have, sort of like we do animal control, have an income statement for urban forestry. So that was her other choice, or other option. So there weren't any, I thought that a lot of Jamie's impacted service to the residents.
Right, and I was looking for alternatives that weren't shutting down a pool, shutting down a splash pad.
Which is- right.
I mean, these are all services that directly affect our citizens, their families, their children. These are family places.
Right.
And I don't understand why that's our only choices.
Well,
What
and
are some of the other ways that Parks Department can buckle up?
We can,
Can I ask a question, Marianne?
Sure.
So does it have to be a savings within the parks? I mean,
It could be in another department as well, yes.
were there some like low-hanging fruit or things that you thought, that wouldn't impact another department's service? And then I also had a question. The River Life fountains, they're only $7,000?
Yeah, I guess so. I misquoted myself
Okay,
in the
all right.
meeting. Yep.
Because I was like, ooh, 17. That
I
would
thought
get
it-
us
yeah.
close. Okay.
It's confusing that with the well thing.
Okay.
I can speak to the budget. So when we did our budget, our line items are, like Mary Ann said, trying to find extra. The only other option is cutting services elsewhere, that we're not going to do something, or we don't buy certain equipment, or we cut staff. And if we cut staff, we cut services. So we are really to a bare minimal budget, and hoping, utility costs aren't too high next year, or equipment prices don't go up any more than they have, because we've budgeted very, very tight within the budget. So our next option is staff or more supplies, and those all affect how we operate and how we do our services. So
What type of equipment would you be looking at?
Well, the only equipment in our general budget, it's not part of our rolling stocks, that's separate, would be like small hand tools, electrical supplies, plumbing supplies, lumber, paint, those kind of things.
Okay. And how much would you be saving if we didn't purchase those or all of those?
Well, it's maintenance to your park, so we wouldn't be doing those services then. Like, if you're going to defund electrical and plumbing supplies and we have lights and toilets break, we don't have anything to fix those with, so then those services are impacted. So, I mean, you can do whatever you want to the budget and we'll live within those means, but that will possibly affect, maintenance of the facilities, and also affects the public. I mean, what we do is a service to the public. That's what our department is, so.
Okay, I know that you have a lot of seasonal help that you bring on for parks. Would that be correct? Because I see people, mowing lawns or what have you.
Yep.
Could we space out the time that we mow the lawns? I mean, if we mow them every 7 days, what about every 10 days? How can we save some money that way? I just don't like to see all the cuts being like pools and splash pads. It's the summertime, it's Wisconsin, ice skating rinks. This community has very little that we offer kids that are 10, 12, 14, other than going skating in the wintertime, going to pools when it's 90 degrees and you might not be fortunate enough to have air conditioning in your home. People pay a lot of money in taxes in the city of Wausau, and I don't think that every cut should be about cutting services to people like swimming pads and splash pads and swimming pools. That is not where I think that these cuts should all be. I think sometimes the cuts have to be where a certain department might have to take a little hit in something. And I don't know what that would be, but I don't think the answer is cutting services like that. Not when people pay as much as they do in property taxes in this city.
Well, again, we're a service department, so if you don't want us to mow the parks,
I'm
we
not
don't have to
saying
mow
that.
the parks.
I didn't say
But
that.
I mean, the grass grows really fast in the spring, and if we are already behind on it, we've been asked even to have the no mow May. We just can't do that because we have to follow the city ordinances, but also if we get too far behind, then we're paying overtime for staff and it's costing us more. So we have certain schedules where I think we're pretty efficient right now. Anything we do will have an effect on the public because that's what we do. And that's the reality of where the budget situation is right now, is that you're asking all of our departments to cut as much as we possibly can. It's going to impact that's what levy limits do to a community. They impact the community because we can only go so far. I mean, we can cut seasonal staff, we could not do the plantings downtown, and we do a lot that are nice to have things that we could definitely cut, but it also affects, we spend a lot of money on plantings downtown, all the hanging baskets, we brought that to the council last year, that wasn't approved either. That takes staff time to water, we got self-watering things so that now we only have to water every 3 days versus every day. So we're trying to be as efficient as possible, but there are things that beautify our community that are nice to have for our community, but all of that costs money and staff. So in any area, you could cut in any of our departments, but it does affect services. So we can't, if you cut any more, we'll just live within those means, but it's not going to be without affecting the services that we offer.
How many baskets of flowers do we have roughly in Wausau?
Well, we had about 130, and then now we're adding more on the new streets by the mall redevelopment area, and I can't remember how many are in that area. So there'll be more.
I don't think adding more flower baskets, as pretty as they are, and they are, but then you take the time and the money of having staff go out there every 3 days and water. Then there's the fertilizer, there's the trucks, the gas, the maintenance. I just think that when we are in a situation like this, I would much rather see a pool open then additional flower baskets. I would rather see baskets not necessarily gone, but the numbers don't have to be as such. Maybe do every other poll. But I just don't think that,
That doesn't really, it saves me on the, maybe on the material cost, but you still have staff needed to do that work. So
how much is a basket of flowers that we put up? Would you say-
I'd have to redo it. I don't
Okay.
know. I can't tell you. I'd have to go back and look at my notes from last year.
Last year it was $12,000.
Okay.
And adding more is only going to add on to that price significantly, because as more facilities are built, the more we're going to want street beautification. I just don't think that we're in a situation where we can continue to add to something like that. We've got the beautiful umbrellas downtown. We don't need new umbrellas every year. It's something that we take out, we put up, and it's beautiful. I mean, heck, we're using it on the covers of our budget here. I think we have to start looking into things like that we can use repetitively year after year instead of going out and buying.
Well, the baskets, we do reuse those. The basket part of it, the self-watering basket, we do reuse that every year. It's all the plant material that we purchase to put in them, and then the staff time.
Right, and
So
and
the
materials.
We own the basket part themselves.
Right.
We did invest in that a few years ago to save money.
Right, but as I said, we're going to be planting, you're going to have to buy more if we're going to be putting more baskets downtown. And my thought process on this is, can we find a way to do things downtown, like the umbrellas, that we don't have to purchase for every year, like the flowers? And then the time spent, the employee time paying them to plant all of these flowers and then hang them up. Something like the umbrellas where we can hang up, we can use them again the next summer, hang them up, and not have this money going out the door every year. Rather, like I said, something that we can reuse, recycle every year. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, I think the umbrellas, the umbrellas are provided by the, one of the property owners downtown, the Washington Square, and it's just the staff time for DPW to put them up and take them down, if I recall.
Right, and I'm all for that.
We pay for half of them?
Mike, we pay,
Okay.
we
Yeah.
pay for half. It's about 25,000.
Okay.
And they do not get reused year over year. A lot of times when you have a wind event, they get ripped up during the year. They're not very stout. They look nice, but
Yeah.
that's a continuing cost.
Okay, so it is about 25,000 a year for those
Mary Ann
umbrellas.
could confirm that. I think it's 25, we pay half, because I saw the bill here recently. I approved it.
Okay.
What about going to the merchants and saying, hey, if you want a flower basket on the pole outside, you're going to have to pay for the flowers? I see you smiling over there, and
Sponsor, flower
Right.
sponsor.
exactly.
Some of that might fall on the River District downtown, but
I just think that we can find a creative way to keep these pools open, these splash pads open, and the skating rinks open. I just don't see that as the place to cut services. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? I don't know if there's any low-hanging fruit, Mary Ann, from another department that we can, I know we looked at the Economic Development Fund, but is that appropriate or not? I guess that's the question we've kind of run into, the appropriateness of moving money from one department to another to keep the pools open. Anything else? We need to think about this a little bit more. I don't have an answer, I guess. I mean, if we wanted to remove, we pay for half the umbrellas. That's 12,000. I don't know. The flower baskets. I guess that's. We don't have an exact figure on what that's going to be. But if it was 12, was it 12 last year?
maybe looking at janitorial services. I don't know, can we cut back on janitorial services, like in the contract? I mean, window cleaning, carpet cleaning.
Yeah. It's,
Well, I think it would be difficult, right? I mean, all the stuff that we buy for the facilities, janitorial services, right? We could reduce the amount of time that they spend in the buildings, but less cleaning, right? Garbage won't be taken out every day, bathrooms won't be cleaned. So, yeah, we could. I don't know what that looks like as far as in the budget. We didn't look at that. I mean, those kind of necessities for the facilities that we own and operate and where employees work, so. I guess I wouldn't suggest
yeah, I
it.
think window cleaning, we cut that last year.
No, we did.
Oh, we did not,
So-
okay. Alder Watson,
So I probably won't be very popular for suggesting this, but like, is there a way we could like temporarily lower council stipends for like 1 year to get a little bit? You know, I'm looking at, okay. I just wondered, like, if you wanted to get an extra 10 or 15, I was doing some math. I mean, it would be like maybe like a grand less for everybody, you know, and if it was temporary, because I know like the salary, it's not the thing that's making me chomp at the bit. I'm like, yeah, I got it. But we've already established that it doesn't pay for the time we spend on this. This is a labor of love for all of us. So, but I was just wondering if that was like a combination of different cuts could amount to 30 grand. And if we could take a little hit on our
I think
salaries.
reducing our salary wouldn't be able to take effect until after the election.
It wouldn't, we couldn't adjust it before, as of January, because
Yeah.
we signed the contracts. So we'd have 4 months of the regular salary, and then it would only be like 6 or 8 months of reduced.
Yeah,
So that probably wouldn't, okay. Just an idea.
and there is, yeah. Alder Tierney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And you're going to give me that same look you did when you were walking up the aisle, but it's
Yeah.
worth it, worth a shot. Is there any equipment that is not in use for DPW that we could look at selling for additional revenue? I mean, I have no idea. I'm just throwing
Right.
that out there.
Yeah, typically, when we don't have use for equipment, we do sell it, you know, and then that comes back in as a revenue, which goes back into the motor pool for purchasing new equipment, yeah. So really, when we look, I think DPW, I think our expense cuts were well over $200,000. And we were basically down to, delaying hiring new people, you know, to try to make up the additional, directive that we were given, right? So,
Now you're really going to hate me.
okay.
Okay. A couple of years ago, we bought that truck from Minnesota, the one that does the ice breakup.
Mm-hmm.
We probably haven't had to use it because we've had 2 very mild winters.
Possibly, I don't know if we've had it out, Dustin.
Are you talking about the icebreaker attachment?
Yeah.
We did take it out briefly last winter on a couple neighborhoods up by the hospital. But you're right, with a milder winter, you don't use it as often.
I'm just wondering if the cost of what was paid for it is worth a few times. I know that there's going to be that winter when we're going to have ice stacked up on the roads. But even with that piece of equipment, there's no way you're going to get around to the entire city if we do have something like that, because typically, you know, you have some really bad ice. You guys are out there with the sand salt mixes and sanding corners and everything like that, which is very effective. There's just no way you're going to get that one piece of equipment through the city before some of the things that you're spreading on are going to do their job. So I'm wondering, is it worth the cost of having it? And that's
I guess-
something you guys would have to decide.
I guess
not
it
me.
kind of depends on the goals. So the goal of that machine is to try and find mechanical ways to deal when we get ice and snowpack built up. Obviously, we can do salt. Salt hurts the environment, and it's not getting any cheaper. I guess the goal behind that is when we have these bad spots. So in the past, what we would do is send out graders, And it's extremely hard on the roads, it's hard on the curbs, it's hard on the grader. We spend a lot of money on maintenance on that. This machine can kind of do the same thing without causing all that extra damage.
How does it do that without damaging the roads? Just wondering.
Basically, the spikes kind of get down in there and break it up. So like a grater blade, normally you just put a whole bunch of downforce and you got to scrape it across the pavement and try and knock that stuff loose. Where this is just like kind of like an aerator, if you've ever seen an aerator for a lawn, and it just goes along and it can actually break up that ice and the snow chunks. And then if it is stuck down to the road, we can actually throw some salt on it, and it uses those little divots, and it'll get down and start breaking it up underneath, and that way, then you come back with a plow and it scrapes right off, and then we can get the road clear.
I'm just trying to have some creative thoughts here on how we can do some of this, but, you know, if you guys have a piece of something laying around that you can say, you know what, Vicki, you're right. We've got a piece of equipment we can get rid of. But, okay, thank you.
You're right.
Mayor, I think you had something?
Okay, I'll make a suggestion. So one of the park's suggestions for budget cuts was to drill a well so they, up on Sylvan Hill, so they could save $17,000 a year on making snow, because right now we're sending city water, we're using city water, which is treated, filtered, expensive water to make snow. So the suggestion was we would drill a well and we would have save $17,000 a year. That turned out that the well turned out to be more expensive than that was worth. So that $17,000 will be going back to parks. So essentially, now we're short about half. So the large, what do we call it, small project, capital project is $110,000.
Was, yeah.
I think they're down to.
There's another 13,000 to come out of that, and you got the 30,000.
So 17.
So rather than come out of other departments, it would come out of Parks Department.
So 17,000 for the well and then 13,000 out of small projects to fund the pool? Is that what you're?
Small projects is down to 81,000 now.
It was already reduced. The 17
Okay.
was already taken out of small projects to offset that.
Okay, so that's not available then.
Oh.
Okay. Anything else? We need to think about this, Alder Hinkie?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I've heard lists now of, like, we chose this over this, and I've never seen those lists. And I mean, if people want to cut something else or eliminate another service, I mean, I think it would be helpful if we had those lists, because then we could come to these meetings and we can say, this is my idea. And then we can make amendments and we can vote on it and discuss it. So I think until we have those, I guess I think that would help people who, others here that it could help them come up with ideas to, or how they would like to see it spent, and then they can make an amendment and we can second it and we can discuss it and then we can vote on it and take it that way. But I think without seeing those lists, I don't think we have enough education to make those amendments needed. Just my thoughts. So I mean, if we could get some of those, then we could come to this meeting with what we want to see and with our amendments, and then we can vote on them. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. It's hard to visualize finding $30,000 when you don't know what to draw the $30,000 out of. That's I think that's part of the roadblock we're sort of hitting right now. I mean, it's easy. I mean, if we, it'd be as easy, if we could just, deal with what's in the Economic Development Fund, because that's 45,000 right there. But and that would most certainly fund our pools. But it sounds like that like I said, the looks like a shell game, but I don't know. It is drawing 5 here and 6 there from 3 other departments, the same thing, or taking a larger piece of money that is already earmarked to study parks instead, but to redirect it to be used to support parks. So, I don't know.
So, when the mayor and I looked at some of these initiatives, the park study and the administration, we looked at those as one-time expenses, and we used one-time money, because of course those are reserves that have sat there for a while unused. So that's why it made some sense to use
Okay.
the economic development funds. If you were going to use those for something like ongoing parks operations, you have to know that, like, once you use them, they're not going to be available in the 27 budget. So you're going to be back in the exact same spot. And we do have, other one-time fixes in the budget. That's not to say that we're going to be back, because we had several departments say, like, I have this vacancy, and I'll continue to maintain that vacancy for the year. Jamie has one in her office, surveyor in Public Works, division chief in fire, clerical in PD. I have an accountant, I'm trying to think who the other ones are. Those are all like sort of one time. So, we do have a lot of one-time fixes in here to get us there. And again, we've talked in the past, the formula that the state has set up for the city for expenditure restraint and for levy limits really relies heavily on net new construction and CPI. But CPI isn't always reflective of the inflation that we have, and we, in our communications with our landfill, like with the Harters, he was like, CPI never keeps up with expenses. So, when we were asking him after, Public Health and Safety said they wanted a 7-year contract, he was like, oh, I thought you guys would go for a 10-year. And we said, give us a sweetener and we can bring it back. He was like, I don't really want to do a sweetener because CPI never covers my costs, my inflation, and we've kind of looked at, equipment costs, street reconstruction costs, and you can see that CPI is not an indicator of what we're seeing in cost increases. So that is a struggle. So, like most likely, if we want to continue to meet these, and there are strategies, to think of a good word, that we can deploy to help us meet expenditure restraint. That's why when we had this vision to do animal control, we set up a new fund, because then it's just the levy of the fund and not the total cost that falls within that expenditure restraint. Because when we look at the 2 thresholds that we have to pass, expenditure restraint, which is $1 million grant every year, is the most difficult one for us to achieve. So those are the kinds of strategies that we can use to help us succeed, but they have to, make sense too. But that's why we thought for the park study and for the administrative study, taking those one-time expenses out of a fund that had reserves made some sense.
That does actually, that adds extra insight here, and there is a lot of one-time cuts and one-time strategies in this budget, almost too many, that I feel comfortable with, and so.
I can definitely put together the list. When we went through them, like Eric said, he had offered up to freeze 2 operator positions. That would have saved $73,000. That was for 6 months, but then, that's right in the beginning of the year, because he has the vacancies right now that he was, starting to recruit for. And that's snow removal time. And so, it seemed perhaps unwise to keep those positions vacant when we could need them desperately during winter season. The other, for another example, is he offered to reduce the salt budget because he does have a surplus or a large stock on hand. But when you look at what that budget is already and what we've experienced in salt usage in past years, it would have dropped it, to about 250, and we've had years where we've used 300 some thousand dollars worth of salt. So again, it seemed a little like overly optimistic, and perhaps then, he said, well, we can cut those things, but I will come back if I need more salt or if I need, and I just a little uncomfortable cutting those
Yeah.
things. But we can definitely, I have no problem. And it will take me a little finessing because some people took the savings already. They said, oh, here's my the instructions were they were supposed to put it on the sheet and not take the savings. And then we would take the savings once we had decided if we were going to take them. Not all departments followed the instructions properly, and they already took the savings. So I'd have to go through and vet those, like clear up these spreadsheets of who took the savings and who didn't. So it would take me, an hour or a half hour or something like that to clean that up. But a lot of them are marked as one-time savings, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Okay. Alder Kinney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I know, Mary Ann, that taking that $45,000 to keep the pool open would be a one-time thing.
Yes.
And I know they would be back here again next year asking about a pool closure. My fear is if we'd let this pool go, next year they would come back asking to close another one. Because that's where, one of the things where they find it, one's not acceptable to me, much less two. So I know it would be a one-time fix, but in my mind, it's keeping all three pools for one more year.
Yeah, either that or they decide not to fill that pool. And we're still paying for the pools. We should at least enjoy
In
them.
good shape.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing, when the suggestion, let's say, to not run the 400 block, we had donors give us money for the River Life, for Brockmeyer Park, for the 400 block. And when we build these assets with donor money and then we close them down, I just think that it's a bad message to send these donors because, that's my concern is who's going to want to donate to our projects, even with just the River Edge Trail along Thomas Street there, that would be south of Thomas Street, yeah. I have a bad sense of direction. We got donations for that. And so we need to appreciate the donations that we have and embrace them.
I understand that, but we're putting pools, when we build them, when we do improvements, on the back of the taxpayer.
Right. Understood.
So how can we tell the taxpayer that we need X number of dollars to do improvements on a pool or to redo a pool, only to close it before it's paid for? Or not close it, but go down to twos. I just don't think, I understand what you're saying about the donors, but I'm saying the same thing about people who are paying property taxes for these services.
I think I'm going to let Jamie speak, and then I'll get you Alder Watson.
Well, I just want to add a comment to Mary Ann's comment about donors, is that's something that the council has to consider when you have people coming in front of you saying they want to donate. Like we just had another sculpture come in front of the council and want to donate. Anything you accept from donations are great. They beautify our community, and they do help build projects and help enhance things, but there is a cost the city takes on when you accept that donation. And that a lot of the times is not considered. And then every sculpture and every statue that's put in, either my department or Public Works has to maintain that into the future. That's a cost, whether it's a little cost for this one, it adds up over time. So understand, I just want to point that out from a council perspective. If we're looking at budget and we're looking at future budgets, please keep that in mind, that as you have projects come in front of you, that yes, maybe not cost to the city at the time, but the city is taking on the responsibility for maintenance. That ends up a cost that now we're sitting in front of you at budget season saying, we've just had these added costs to us, now we have to maintain them, and we have to cut other services because of that. So I harp on the maintenance side all the time. I just felt that was a good spot to put it in.
Thank you. Alder Watson?
And to sort of piggyback on that, I know, refresh my memory, the downtown police, they were paid by grant, or by a donation last year, correct? And then is one still to sustain this year, or they're totally on our payroll this year?
So in the budget, we have one being funded by grant and one being funded by the levy.
Okay. I guess I'm looking at the ED fund because a safe downtown, happy businesses, happy customers really helps our economic development. That wouldn't be as necessarily much of a shell game to pay for that one officer out of that.
We did actually to ask community development if, through the block grant advisory committee, if that would be a way to help us fund our officers. We were told no.
Okay,
But
but
we were thinking on that same line.
but the economic development one, we wouldn't be able to that would have to go through.
Was that no by the committee or no because of rules? For the committee?
Well, Tammy didn't think it would meet the,
Meet the eligible criteria.
So for the block grant, but for the ED funds, that,
right. I guess I would say that would be the council's, your decision if you wanted to do that. I think that makes more sense than the pool, frankly. And you
But
are
then-
going to referendum on both of those. I mean, the proposal is that you would go to referendum on both those positions.
in 2026.
Yes.
So if that was the case, you could, we could choose what is taken out of that ED fund instead, and maybe put that towards the police officer.
I think Alder McElhaney, then I'll get back to Alder Tierney.
Okay, so let's go back. I'm putting my HR hat on. When we did those two police officers, we did it as a pilot program, and I believe that it was supposed to go back to HR because if there was anything with that, because of the fact that we were told specifically that if we asked, what if this is no longer funded by foundation, and we were told that it would be melted in with attrition at the police department. Was that completed? Because that was the discussion we had. It wasn't, the committee was not going to add 2 police officers indefinitely. It was supposed to come back. I don't know the timing of it, but that is something that I will have to talk to HR chair about because I don't know what the resolution stated.
I do remember it, it was supposed, HR was supposed to discuss it, but yeah, I don't remember I don't remember the exact wording of the resolution either. How we were going to continue that program after the pilot ran out. Alder Tierney?
I specifically remember that conversation because I said to the chief, so we are not paying for 2 more police officers. And he said, no, he had expected there to be approximately 4 retirements. So he felt pretty confident that they could be brought in through attrition because I do remember saying, so you're going to have these guys for 1 year and then what happens? And he had said attrition. So I was going to be questioning that as well, Alder McElhaney, as to what happened. Why aren't they coming in through attrition rather than?
Yeah, we lost our chief to the neighborhood meeting, but I
Right.
do, now, the police chief was using vacancies to cover non-sworn staff, but what was he was also doing something with holding a position, there was an open position because the officer, I think, was on
Light duty?
light, was either light duty or military service. So he was able to hold the position open with that. But yeah, I don't remember the specifics now, how that was
Well,
going
I
to
just want to make sure, because I don't want to, I mean, are we looking at a referendum to add positions to the police force then?
That was part of the discussion that we had at the budget meeting and is in the packet. It's part of those 15 overall positions, the 12 firefighters, the community resource outreach coordinator, Tracy, and then the 2 police officers. I've got the resolution for the 2 police officers. It doesn't really, anticipating 2 officers for 6 months. It doesn't say anything about how these positions will fade into the sunset, so to speak. It just says, now therefore be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Wausau to approve the addition of 2 officers for 6 months in '24, 2 officers in '25, be effective at the start of the pay period following selection as approved by the resolution. Be it further resolved that the Common Council are hereby authorized and directed to modify the '24 budget, and that the proper city officials are directed to accept donations and grants to fund the offset costs. So it doesn't say anything about past 2025, but it doesn't say this must come back to committee or anything like that in the resolution itself.
So they could just disappear at the end of the year, those positions, if the resolution doesn't specify, and there's nothing in the budget.
Right. I mean, right now they're in the budget through the grant and part of that one-time money that we cobbled together through ARPA investments. They're in that, in the
So
GMT
that,
money.
sorry, one more, that will last through 25 then?
Through 2020.
Oh, 26, I mean.
26.
Yeah, I meant that. Yeah, so, so that's the way, but I think, and then what if, and then further down the road, you're looking for a referendum to add to the
Levy.
for, and then those would be added positions at the police budget.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so 15 public safety FTE salary and benefits, for 2026, 1,451,746. Safer grant, 153,677. ARPA grant, $157. ARPA investment income, $376,000. Unsecured donation,
That's the
$124,924.
one officer.
And the supplemental pay retroactive payment of $280,000 gets us where we're almost where we need to be, and then $86,000 out of the levy. So, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I'm just putting my public health and safety hat on for just a second as I listen to the discussion about the downtown officers. And as a caveat of your budget research, I think it would be wise to ask the chief to analyze what the true need for those 2 officers is going to continue to be once the shelter leaves the downtown, because that should then really reduce at least some of the concentration of our unhoused population in the downtown area, which those officers are working to address issues with. So once that shelter operation migrates over to Bridge Street Mission, will they still even need both of them, or could they get by with one of them? I think that's an important analysis even for 2026, because if the shelter transitions early in the year, perhaps in the spring, we may not need both of them doing that job full-time. Maybe they could transition, or at least one of them could transition back to patrol. So I think that's an important question to ask the chief going forward. Just knowing that the location of the shelter and the staging, waiting for that shelter to open, and then immediately after it closes, has presented a lot of issues that those officers are addressing, both early in the morning and late in the day. And that entire problem, or at least a lot of it, may dissipate in the downtown. So I think we should ask if they really, really still need 2 of those. this year and next. I mean, in perpetuity. If the shelter migrates to the west side by February or March, depending on the construction schedule, you may get most of the year where you don't need two of them down there anymore.
There's, with the grants, we've got 86,000 that's on the levy, and that would be, one officer's salary would be more than 86,000.
Yeah. So the 124,924 is about half of the two officers.
Yeah.
I mean, one officer, you know, again, depending on if you're on family or single policy, one officer is a little bit more
Well, and
expensive than the other one, but.
I only offer that as a follow-up because patrol is responding to the downtown anyway. And so, and they always have been. They just put a concentration of effort downtown to work with our business community, but, you know, I think that need may grow to be less. I mean, you will always have some traffic in the downtown and issues downtown that you need to address, perhaps with our unhoused population, but I think just the sheer volume of people that are waiting for the in and out of the shelter operation on a daily basis is going to be less than it's been. I think we should try to plan for that. Thank you.
Okay. Alder Watson?
So wouldn't that then be more of an argument to using one-time funds? Because if that is going to be potentially like reevaluated in 2027, it wouldn't be like having to, you know, come back. So like using the ED funds to make up that balance instead of having it on the levy might be an idea. I know Marianne's like, stop talking about the Economic Development Fund.
I would tend to agree, because, you know, pool would be an ongoing expense. If these positions are going to be reevaluated, you know, then using one-time funding would get 86,000 off the levy, and that would give us the wiggle room. Actually, that would give us the wiggle room for both the pool and for the CCITC data taking project. So. If that works. We don't have the chief here, so we can't.
Yeah, I texted him to see if he was done with his neighborhood meeting, but he didn't text me back.
He's probably talking. I know how that meeting goes. He's enjoying some lemon bars and cookies right now.
Oh. Yeah, I love lemon bars.
Okay, so I don't know. Are we at Alder Henke?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to kind of follow up with that. I think a lot of these are great ideas, but yeah, I'd like the chief here to, before
Yeah.
we started
I don't think
slashing his budget because he's not here.
I don't think we're at the point of making an amendment.
No, and then I guess I would just, you know, if we could come to the next meeting with some amendments and just start knocking, you know, actually have some forethought and try and come to the next meeting with amendments. I have two I would like to make, but I think that can wait for the next meeting. And
Okay.
but just my thought for the next meeting, if you know, if we figure out if people have opinions on how they would like to see things go, have the amendment ready, and then we can spend the next meeting
And then just
voting.
finish those things up.
Yeah.
That sounds like that might be a.
Oh, yeah,
good-
'cause
We don't have a fourth budget meeting set.
No, we don't.
We'd have to schedule something. But maybe, I don't know what the calendars look like.
Marianne, could you walk us through if we work back from our goal of approving this on the November, the first
Yes.
November meeting?
So there was some discussion. If you remember last year, we had the public hearing and approved the budget the first meeting in November. And so that would be, historically, we have done them on the same night a couple of times throughout my career here. Usually, the schedule is the first meeting of November, we have the public hearing, and the second meeting of November, we have the adoption of the budget. I think last year, we were concerned if the budget got vetoed, that we would be really short on time to schedule another meeting, because, you know, the residents are always really anxious to get their tax bills out. And so, you know, like, if we delay after Thanksgiving too much, then it just puts us behind on tax bill generation. So we, as a staff, I think staff were thinking, oh, one option would be to have the public hearing the last meeting of October for council, which would be the October 28th. If we were going to do that, I have the publication done based on the budget that we have today, that, is published. So that's the proposed budget as of today. So if I submitted that to the Daily Herald, it has to be in 15 days before the public hearing, it has to be published. So we would be kind of right up to that date. So I would have to submit it with the budget that is proposed right now. There's no law that says you have to adopt what you publish. You can change it however you want, and there's no need to republish or have another public hearing on changes. I mean, you just have to publish your budget once. And then we would be able to adopt the budget November 11th, which still would give us, a good early crack at budget adoption. So those would be,
So it would have to be published, say, like on the 13th
yes. And I think I would have to get that to them by Wednesday to get that done.
of this week.
Yes, of this week. And like I say, I have it done based on what we have in the budget book.
But the budget is substantially done. The numbers aren't going to change.
Right.
It's just
I mean, they
numbers,
might-
well, the final number isn't going to change. The mill rate would probably not change.
Right,
It's going to be money inside
right,
where, how it's allocated within the budget itself,
right.
so.
I think, there was some discussion at the last meeting about the solar project and getting that, the second phase, because if you remember when we did
Yeah.
CIP, we didn't, there's been some changes down at the federal level, and we would need to escalate that a little faster. We did not add that into the budget, so, that would change the capital, but if you funded it with debt, your debt payment would be the next year, 2027 is when you would see that payment go up.
Okay. Does that make sense, committee? That timeline?
So
We-
the discussion is have the public hearing on the 28th of October, budget approval on November 11th.
If we could target that, I would like to see that, if we could target that, absolutely. So, but then we could still have another budget workshop
Yes.
and approve our amendments
Yep.
within the budget. Okay. Committee, that sound good? Then we can, so what we're going to need is, I guess, we need to talk to the police chief on that funding to see how that would fit into our, how we were going to fund these other, the pool and other, I guess, the CCIT, so.
I'm not sure if the county has funded that CCIT, that was a
Yeah, that-
50/50 or whatever project.
Might have to see what the county's
Yeah,
going
I
to do on
can
that.
ask
It's a-
Jerry for an update on that.
Yeah, that's actually 30/30/30 because of
Yeah.
healthcare center.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
So, okay. With that, should we move on to discussing the referendum a bit? Because, as the mayor stated earlier this evening, we are to a point where it's, we can approve this, the 26 budget, but by 2027, we have some more very substantial funding challenges. It's, I don't know, ticking, the mayor calls it the ticking time bomb, the press calls it the fiscal cliff. I'm more inclined to call it the fiscal cliff, I guess. But I guess, I don't know if that, it's referendum is probably the most logical method in order to address this issue, because it's an amount of $1,554,000 would be what we would need in order to fund 15 full-time public safety officers, 13 for the fire and 2 for police. So,
So we did on Friday meet with Ellers, our financial advisors, because they do some advisory work on referendums. And they did, kind of go through their slide deck of, kind of like why communities are not able to fit these grant positions in their budget once the grant ends, and, really kind of look at, they have a great slide that looks at CPI and budget costs and shows that, the levy limit and the expenditure restraint really don't keep pace with the cost of providing services. And they, did recommend that if we are going to do this, using a communications firm is very advantageous because, they're good at getting those communications out in a succinct fashion that can explain, what the situation is here. And they, recommended, I guess, Miller Communications, who is the same company who helped the city with the PFAS back when PFAS was initially issue for the city, and tried to help us with some communications there. We did meet with them today. Basically they have a multi-phased approach. One, the most comprehensive one, is where you would do a survey of, basically just send out a survey to all the residents, how they feel about these positions, things like that, to get a feel for whether there would be success in the referendum. That, there's a cost associated with that, as well as a time need. So they had suggested us we would be kind of at a time crunch if we tried to fit that survey in between now and January, because time is ticking. The second phase of their approach is really the informational, the communication with the residents. That, to me, is the key, not so much the survey. So we are trying to put together a committee of the whole for this Thursday to present what that would look like. Maybe invite Miller Communications. If the council was interested in hiring, professional assistants, we would need a budget modification for that.
that would come out of the 25 budget.
25 budget, yes. And then we could sole source it, given their reputation with other communities. I mean, when you go down the line and look at communities who have used them, in talking to other communities, they've been very happy with Miller Communications. So those would be the two agenda items if we had a committee of the whole. Because when you look at, like, what committee does that fit in? Mm-hmm. Finance typically is how to finance something, but whether to hire a consultant for that.
It was
maybe
much
is
like we did with legal counsel earlier this summer.
Yeah.
So, okay, Alder Tierney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If this is happening on Thursday, when do you anticipate notifying us what time? Because
So Cody sent out something right before this meeting.
I don't have
Yeah.
that information with me.
So it would follow infrastructure committee. 6 o'clock, yeah, Thursday.
Yeah, I think I saw that go on my pad here right before the meeting, so there was an invitation. Okay, any other questions, or, I guess, we'll get the big information would be, given to us this Thursday, so. But I think that's probably, if a referendum were to fail, or if we were not to do the referendum, I don't know where, when that would have to come out, that 1.5 million would have to come out of the levy, and that would be very drastic cuts.
Yeah, and so we did, they said, well, you'd have plenty of time if you did the referendum in August. There's a couple of problems with having the referendum in August. One being you don't have any time to respond after the referendum results. The other one that they highlighted is, that will be a statewide primary. Our residents are going to get a lot of other bits of information because it's going to be the governor's primary, and we would be competing with all of that noise from that election, and they saw that as, I guess, a downside. But to me, the big thing is having time for budget planning.
Yeah.
Come April, if that's what needs to happen.
All right.
So if the referendum doesn't pass, we already have these firefighters because of the ARPA and SAFER. So then they would no longer be, because if the community is saying no, then they would lose their position, correct?
That would be a decision we'd have to make.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know, because I would think that the referendum would have given us a pretty clear indication, but I didn't know it went further on to us. Okay.
Mara, did I see
Well,
your hand,
I
or-
just add, we've been watching what's going on down at Brookfield. Mary Ann's got several other examples. There were 6 or 7 here recently. About half of them have passed, half of them have failed. So, there's obviously no guaranteed. I mentioned Brookfield. Right now, they're $4 to $7 million shortfall. So they're making personnel adjustments right now and other adjustments. Not easy. They're a city of 43,000, I think. So they're roughly the same size as we are.
The Wausau School District just went through 2 referendums. The one, was it 2 years ago, passed, and then the one this last year failed, but I think it failed because it was on the heels of the first referendum that was, did not meet, or I guess, I don't know what the best way to say it. It's, the community didn't feel that it delivered what the referendum stated it was supposed to do. So, it's my opinion. Anything else? Otherwise, okay. I think we'll schedule a meeting. I don't know, tentative.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Do people want to look at their calendars? I know. So we have the 14th for finance. I know we have other agenda items.
We got a lot on that agenda
Yeah.
already because there's going to be a joint meeting. Would the 13th, Monday? It would have to be after the HR meeting. And I haven't seen that agenda yet. It wouldn't necessarily have to be a long meeting because I think we know what we need to do.
But you want me to bring the list of items that weren't selected? Okay.
Could we
Yeah,
get that
even
prior?
even if we could get them emailed to us.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can, oh, I'll definitely have for you
Before that.
ahead of time.
I mean, hopefully then we can have amendments at least written out in our head or discussed a little bit, and we could just spend that meeting voting.
Yeah.
Right.
We're
Make
not
it-
spinning our wheels on this, so. So, Monday?
Monday, yeah, HR starts at 4:45. There is a lot of overlap for committee members, isn't there? Are you on HR?
Yeah, it's basically, it's almost
Everyone but Sarah.
everyone but Sarah,
Yeah.
so. Which, 6 o'clock?
We could do it earlier than that.
Okay,
Yeah. I haven't heard about the HR agenda, but I don't expect anything big. So
5:30.
whenever people can get there, I mean, I think the earlier the better.
5:30 maybe?
Okay.
And then if
Or
HR
could you
goes-
just say following HR?
Maybe.
Because I could come early.
And, it may be over by 5:15 even, so.
Well, we can't say following HR because we
Oh, you
can, we
can't.
can schedule it at 5:15.
Yeah, let's do
Could,
that.
could
But-
we even,
HR,
mean,
but
could-
if HR goes long, we start following the meeting.
Could-
Yeah.
could
But
we
if
even
HR
schedule it for
is
5?
done early, we can't start early. We have to start at our
Could
at
you
our
make it by
appointed
5?
time.
Okay, all right,
Yeah, we
But
can reach out
5:15?
to Lisa and see what the agenda looks.
okay.
Okay. Okay, 5:15?
Make 5:15.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, check with
Yeah, we'll check
with the
Lisa.
chair, with the HR director first, and then,
Okay.
okay. Anything else? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion from Watson, second from Tierney. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We stand adjourned.